Who tells your story when the world refuses to print it? Hi there, I'm Chris with a K, and welcome back to This Week in Queer History, where we celebrate queer moments and icons that I wish I had known about as a young gay kid growing up in conservative America. Imagine a world where LGBTQ stories were actively suppressed from mainstream media. And now imagine a group of ragtag, brave people who risked everything to have queer stories shared with the world. So who were these unsung heroes and journalists and publications who dared to report on queer issues long before it was safe or even accepted? In this video, we're going to uncover the powerful legacy of those who laid the groundwork for LGBTQ awareness and community. It's a story you won't believe has been overlooked for so long.
This week in queer history, stories told with love and glee.
So let's rewind to the late 19th and early 20th century. This is long before drag brunches and rainbow crosswalks. Oh, one up for rainbow crosswalks. They're being erased right now. Can't believe it. So ridiculous. Anyway, before Ellen danced into our living rooms, queer lives were whispered in back alleys, coded in poetry, or written in diaries tucked under floor beds. And yet, even in that silence, there were people who dared to publish our stories. Like Adolf Brand, a German anarchist who in 1896 launched Der Eigene. It was the world's first gay journal. Yeah, while the rest of the world was buttoned up in Victorian corsets and moral panic, Brand was saying, let's talk about same-sex love, art, and freedom. He even recruited contributors like Thomas Mann. Imagine being a queer Berliner, picking up this journal and realizing that you weren't alone. This was crazy. It was 1896. But it wasn't all sunshine and roses. Brand paid the price. Police raided his home, arrested him, and eventually the Nazis destroyed his entire archive. His story reminds us the fight for queer journalism has always been one of resilience. And we have to pay attention to this. Freedom of speech, journalism, it's all under attack right now. But things got better. Fast forward to 1947, Los Angeles. Imagine it, a secretary at RKO Studios sneaking time at her typewriter to type something up revolutionary. A lesbian magazine. Edith Ide, aka Lisa Ben, which was an anagram of lesbian, produced Vice Versa, which is often called the first known lesbian publication in America. It was mimeographed, carbon copied, and passed hand to hand. There were no advertisers, no distribution network, just a woman with courage and a typewriter. Lisa Ben wasn't trying to be radical. She once said she just wanted something for lesbians to read. And still, in a world where being outed meant losing your job or your freedom or your family and friends, her cheerful movie reviews and affirming essays were revolutionary. It wasn't scandal, it was survival and joy. I have another video about Lisa Ben and other queer pulp writers, and the link is popping up right above if you want to check that out. If Lisa Ben lit the spark, Phyllis Leon and Del Martin fanned it into a flame. In 1955, they co-founded the Daughters of Bilitis, which was the first national lesbian organization in the US, and a year later launched The Ladder. This wasn't just a newsletter, it was a lifeline. Leon wrote, "We lesbians are interested in educating the public and in providing support for the woman who is afraid and alone." Afraid and alone. I mean, imagine being a closeted lesbian in Kansas in the 1950s and getting this newsletter in the mail and suddenly realizing that other women existed who felt the same way that you did. That's so much more powerful than any like button that's pressed today. Meanwhile, the men of the Mattachine Society, founded by Harry Hay in 1950, were starting their own publications. Frank Kameny, a Harvard astronomer fired for being gay, launched Homosexual Citizen in 1966. Kameny mailed it to Congress, the White House, even J. Edgar Hoover's desk. I mean, imagine Hoover, the man who spent his entire career prosecuting queer people, opening his morning mail to find a newsletter that shouted, "Gay is good." It's kind of chaotic energy that I love and live for. Now let's jump to Greenwich Village, 1955. Beatniks, jazz, and an underground queer scene thrived in the neighborhood. It was here that a scrappy group, Dan Wolfe, Ed Fancher, John Wilcock, and Norman Mailer, launched The Village Voice. The Voice wasn't a gay paper, but it became America's first alternative news weekly and one of the few mainstream platforms where queer voices could appear. Its style was radical, writers could express personal opinions, explore underground culture, and tackle taboo topics. And that openness made space for queer writers and artists. By the 1960s, as anti-war and civil rights movements surged, The Voice amplified queer voices too. It helped bridge queer issues with broader counterculture politics. And here's a fun little fact. The Voice went on to win 3 Pulitzer Prizes. This proves that starting as a counterculture little experiment, it soon became a cornerstone of American journalism. But the world changed in June 1969 when queer people at the Stonewall Inn fought back. And here's something that is often overlooked. Mainstream papers dismissed it as a police disturbance, but queer press knew better. The Advocate in LA and Nichols and Clark's homosexual citizen column in Screw, they published detailed accounts of what happened that night. Imagine reading about the Stonewall Uprising, not in the New York Times, which barely covered it, but in a tiny gay newspaper, passed hand to hand. Those words lit fires in Iowa, Florida, and beyond. And that's how a local bar fight became a global liberation movement. After Stonewall, it was like someone had turned up the volume on queer voices. Suddenly, newspapers and magazines popped up in every city. Come Out launched in 1969 by the Gay Liberation Front in New York, and its front page screamed, "Gay power to gay people. Come out." And Gay, which was a newspaper, started by Jack Nichols and Lee Gay Clark in 1969, one of the first openly sold gay weeklies, they tackled politics with humor and honesty. Gay Sunshine in San Francisco, they mixed poetry, interviews with Allen Ginsberg, and exposés on police harassment. There was the Fag Rag in Boston in 1971, which was radical, very anarchic, sexually explicit, leftist, and also hilarious. It championed sexual freedom as inseparable from political liberation. The Bay Area Reporter, founded in 1971 in San Francisco, it grew into the city's primary queer news source and became the first paper to publish names of those lost to AIDS. And then there was the Philadelphia Gay News, founded in 1976 by Mark Segal, who had already made headlines by disrupting live TV to demand gay visibility. And then there were the lesbian feminist papers. The Lesbian Tide in 1971, which was led by Jean Cordova, militant and unapologetic. The Furies in 1972, which was a fiery collective in DC with Rita Mae Brown and Charlotte Bunch. There was the Lesbian Connection in 1974, which was very grassroots, and it was reader written, and it's still going decades later. And this boom wasn't just about news. It was about creating identity. Every bar listing, every support group notice, every poetry submission whispered, "You belong." And queer journalism wasn't just white gay men with typewriters. Lee Brewster launched Drag magazine in 1970, giving voice to drag queens and transgender people at a time when even gay publications often ignored them. And Virginia Prince, a trailblazing trans woman, created Transvestia in 1960. For decades, she published readers' stories, creating one of the first written communities for trans people in America. And all the way in the UK, Dennis Lemon launched Gay News in 1972. It became Britain's first national gay paper, but Lemon paid dearly. In 1976, after publishing a poem imagining Jesus erotically, he was charged with blasphemous libel in the infamous White House versus Lemon case. Interestingly, it was the last successful blasphemy prosecution in British history. Just take a moment to think about that. Publishing queer art nearly put him in prison, and still, his defiance turned gay news into a symbol of free expression. In the 1980s, queer newspapers became literal lifelines. The Bay Area Reporter printed the first list of those who had died of AIDS, when government officials and the mainstream outlets ignored them. The New York Native provided some of the first detailed coverage, and journalists like Randy Shilts, who wrote And the Band Played On, shaped public understanding of what was happening, though not without controversy. Queer journalists risked their own health and reputations to tell the truth, and they saved lives doing it. By 1990, new voices rose. Frances, or Franco Stevens, launched Curve magazine, one of the most successful lesbian publications. She maxed out her credit card to do it, but she was betting everything on the need for lesbian visibility. And Curve didn't just cover politics. It covered culture, fashion, joy. Franco showed that lesbians weren't invisible and that their stories deserved glossy magazine treatment. From Brands der Eigene in 1896 to Stevens's Curve in the 1990s, queer journalism transformed the world. And these weren't just newspapers, they were community centers. Dating apps before dating apps. Bulletin boards before we had Facebook, and lifelines before we had hotlines. And you have to remember, all of these brave journalists, they risked something. Their jobs, their reputations, sometimes their freedom, but they typed anyway. And they printed anyway. And they mailed anyway. When I was coming out, local gay newspapers like The Pillar, they were my lifeline. And they weren't glossy, they weren't winning Pulitzer Prizes, but they were ours. I'd pick one up and I would see bar listings, which would have karaoke at one spot, or Will and Grace night at another. Drag bingo would be down the street. And it wasn't just the ads. They were a roadmap to belonging. You have to remember, this world, when I was growing up, we didn't have the internet to connect us. And so these hard copy, physical, tangible things, they mattered so much. I'd see ads for businesses that were brave enough to put something in a gay newspaper. And yes, they wanted our money, but more importantly, they wanted our presence. They were telling us, you're welcome here. And those tiny ads made me feel safer, and they gave me permission to walk in with my head up as I was. And the support groups, they were listed right there. If you were struggling, you knew exactly where to go. And if you were alone, you know you didn't have to be. And that's something that Facebook groups can't replicate. The feeling of unfolding a paper, circling an event, and making a plan to show up in person. There's something so tactile and something so grounded about those analog days. The ink would rub off on your fingers. The paper would fold awkwardly into your bag, but it was proof that queer life existed, proof that we weren't alone. And right now, in our digital age, where all these algorithms are deciding what we see and what gets buried, I wonder if maybe we need to have a little bit more of that analog spirit. Because social media platforms, they censor queer words, they shadow ban queer creators, and they're burying queer history. A printed piece of paper, that can't be deplatformed. So maybe the lesson from these pioneers isn't just about the bravery of the past, but maybe it's about the resilience we'll need for the future. Because connection, like real connection, might mean more than swipes and likes. It might mean newsletters, zines, and even a return to those grassroots papers that can't be erased with a click of the button. And you know what is crazy? I just got my new hard copy of Autostraddle. Yeah, they just released a special issue hard copy, and it is so fun, so cool to have it in my hands, the tangible, physical thing that I can keep. And if you don't know, Autostraddle has started out online. It was primarily a queer feminist hub, but really supporting queer culture. And now that I have like a physical copy, it feels like a bridge between the old grassroots papers that I grew up with and today's digital age, really tuned in to queer culture. And Autostraddle they're independent, they are reader supported, and they are, again, unapologetically queer. So thank you, Autostraddle. Really excited to get into it. And yeah, it just reminds me that the heartbeat of our journalism stays the same. Dedicated journalists are hunched over typewriters telling our stories. And to them, I am forever grateful. They gave us something to hold on to, something to believe in, and even if their pages fade, the ink they pressed into history remains in our hearts. So what do you think? Do you remember reading something queer and thinking, Who was brave enough to write this? And how do I find more about them? So let me know in the comments. And don't forget to check out the video popping up right over here for more queer history. And you can always check out myqueerbirthday.com to discover more queer icons and events that happened on your birthday. The link is down in the description below. Until next time, stay strong, stay bold, and keep making history.